Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited to have you on board for the start of our new monthly advocacy workshop. Today's session, we're going to be focusing on how to build local power to influence members of Congress. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, for those of you who are attending your first Alliance webinar, just a couple of housekeeping items. We want to make sure that this is a welcoming space. So if you see anything in the chat or otherwise that you want to flag for us, please just message myself or Tamina in the chat and we'll make sure that that gets squared away because we have a zero tolerance policy for any kind of discrimination or abusive behavior. And we, again, want to make sure that the space we are curating here virtually is diverse, inclusive, and accepting. So, with that being said, I do want to remind folks that the chat and the Q&A box are your opportunities to ask questions, comment. If you do have a specific question for our panelists, we do ask that you use the Q&A box so it doesn't get lost. The PowerPoint shared today will be shared with you after the session, so the slides will be shared, and the webinar is being recorded, so we will send that and the slides and any other resources that we shared today with you as a follow-up email. So don't worry about taking notes, just sit back and enjoy the show. All of you probably are already signed up for action alerts. If not, we have a QR code in the upper right here. If you know you're on the action alert site, that is because you got emails about signing up for this webinar. And so when you kind of join our advocacy network through signing up for our action alerts, there are three kind of main pieces of information you'll be getting from us. Around once a month, you'll be getting a bulletin from us, and that summarizes all the different advocacy highlights and action opportunities for that month. We also have, information about our monthly workshops that we're debuting. We'll talk a little bit more today. And those are again about building advocacy skills together and facilitating peer-to-peer learning. And then you will also have our periodic action alerts. So those are the calls to action to contact Congress, around the budget, when there's a good or a bad bill, making sure that you are in contact with your congressional member and we give you the tools for what to say and how to do that. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble going to the next slide. In terms of our upcoming advocacy workshops, so obviously we have today's session, but we have our next three already scheduled, and then there are more to come from there. So for the rest of spring, you can anticipate a session on how to host a successful member of Congress site visit. That's coming up in just about a month on March 26th. And all these sessions are still also at 1 p.m. Eastern. We have how to build long-term relationships with district staff and local electeds the next month on April 23rd. And then we have using economic and public safety arguments with moderate and GOP offices on May 28th. So by virtue of signing up and joining this session, you should have those other ones on the calendar, and then we will send additional information on more training workshops in the months to come. So again, thank you for joining our first one. Definitely a lot more to come. So without further ado, we are going to transition to today's workshop. We are really lucky to have joining us today two professionals. We have from the wonderful Alliance team, Tamina Chowdhury. She is the Director of Advocacy and Campaign Strategy here at the Alliance. She will be kicking it off first, and then we'll be passing it along to our wonderful partner in the field from the great state of North Dakota, Katie Jo Armbrust, who is the Director of Program Development and Advocacy for the Grand Forks Housing Authority. So really excited to have them both here. And at this point, I'm going to transition it to my colleague Tamina to kick us off for today's session.
Thank you, Alec. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful you could join us today. So today we are kicking off our workshop by talking about how we can build local power, with how we can build local power with their members of Congress. So how do the local, the state, and the federal connect together? Um, so it's Today I'm going to argue and share some skill set and ideas with you that would hopefully get you started in that process. And I think we can go to the next slide, Alec. Okay. Um, so with the federal government in flux, predicting outcomes and maintaining consistency has become more difficult. This also means now more than ever, we have the opportunity to be creative in how we advocate at the federal level. Members of Congress, they live in two worlds, right? Say they live in Washington, D.C., where they're elected to go, and in their district from where they're elected. So when they're making decisions, especially risky or expensive ones, they ask, what happens back home if I do this? Or who will back me up? Or who will attack me? Local power shapes those answers far more than national messaging alone. In other words, when DC listens when districts speak. Next slide, please. Now, local power is often misunderstood as showing up once a year during your lobby day or generating lots of emails or making calls to your member's office. However, local power emerges when members consistently hear the same message from multiple trusted voices, and they know those voices aren't going away. It also requires creating a climate where leaders can make the right decision without the fear of backlash, particularly from those they respect. Next slide, please. It's when a member hears the same message from a mayor, a service provider, a faith leader, or even a business owner, and realizes ignoring may have political consequences. Most members are not policy experts on homelessness or housing, but they are influenced by ecosystems, which includes trusted messengers, repeated signals, and political safety. Our job as advocate is to make the right decision feel like the safe decision. Remember, one action alone is a noise. Sustained part relationships are power. Power grows when diverse messengers move together. Next slide, please. Here's an illustration of some examples of what constitute local power and key messengers whose voices can be influential in federal decision making. Next slide, please. So we know we can build local power, but how do we power map? There are basically four core questions you should ask when power mapping. First, who influences your member of Congress? Second, are members factoring in political consequences in their decision? Third, what are you and allies can do to provide political cover if needed, and if they come under political attack? Fourth, and what is your relationship with the identified influencers? Are there any gaps? Members track patterns. When they hear the same concern from different credible people in meetings, in town halls, in letters, or even local media, it signals political relevance. Strong campaigns invest in relationships before they need to leverage, but it's never too late to start building those relationships. Next slide, please. Alec, I think we're doing the poll for the next one now. Do you want to go to the one after this to see if that's the one? Oh, okay. Um, okay, so we'll come back to this in a second. So once you know who influences your member, the work becomes easier. You can't choose the right plan until you fully understand the problem, the context, and the power dynamics at play. A strong strategy is built only after clearly diagnosing what's happening, why it's happening, and what must change. You can now strategize your advocacy plan once you have identified the influencers. This is a slow work, but it's the work that's needed and the work that wins. Use the insight gained through your power mapping to focus on finding and filling the gaps in your local ecosystem. Next slide, please. I'll glance over this today, but I'll say that our workshop on April will do a deeper dive on this topic, so please join us if you can. So let's talk about building leverage. District staff are often the gatekeepers and the translators of policy. Investing in those relationships early pays off when you need access, intelligence, or follow through. Site visits are a unique way to educate members with first-hand accounts of how their decisions in DC impact their constituents at home. If a visit is not possible, offer virtual testimonials and other creative avenues that showcase your work and the lives impacted by the funds and programs sanctioned by Congress. Remain consistent with their outreach, and even when there is no particular ask. Remember, trust building happens when these relationships exist before the ask. So don't wait for an ask to reach out to your members of Congress. Start building relationships now. Members trust people who share their political reality. A call from a local mayor or hospital CEO, for instance, often carries more weight than a national sign-on letter. Remember, relationships are like infrastructure. Consistent outreach builds relationships, and they're important, and I would argue maybe integral as conduits of our advocacy work. The more and diverse relationships we are building in our local communities, the stronger our advocacy work becomes. Next slide, please. So we talked about messengers, so let's talk about messages. A homelessness advocate saying homelessness is a crisis is expected. A sheriff, faith leader, or a small business owner saying the same thing from their own perspectives lands differently. Tailored framing enhances message effectiveness. The goal is not volume, that is to get as many people as possible to lobby the member of Congress. Instead, its credibility with that member is the goal. Who says it matters? Match the message to messenger and match the messenger to the member. Next, please. So we're doing the poll now. Okay, so we are going to do a very quick poll to see um, how to do like a scan of your local influencers. So you'll see there's a poll that popped up in front of this screen. There's no right or wrong answers. Just identify that you think are who influences your members of Congress today. It could be your faith leaders, your business leaders, law enforcement, or multiple or other. So we'll take like 30 seconds to take this poll, and then we'll come to the next question. Okay. Alec, are you able to share the poll with the group?
It's looking like the top options are business leaders. Just over half of folks shared that business leaders were the top, Other elected officials is coming in at number 2, and advocates is coming in at number 3.
Amazing. So you have an idea of where those influences are, and by that, you know where the gaps are, whether you know those folks. And so that's really a good business leader. That's amazing. Yeah, that's what we hear from folks mostly on the ground is that those are the areas that we need to invest in. Amazing. Okay. So I just wanted us to do a quick exercise on thinking about how identifying local influencers is so important to the local advocacy work and just advocacy work in general. Um, okay, let's go back to the next slide, please. I'm sorry, what's the okay. The sequence are kind of thrown off. Um, okay. So so recess, as some of you know, is very important. It's a great time to connect with the members of Congress. Advocacy is about timing as much as substance. Recess periods are especially powerful because members are home and paying attention to local signals. When you meet your members where they are, literally and politically, it makes a difference. In district advocacy in general, throughout in during recess or not, provide a chance for you to meet with your lawmakers where they're most open to hearing from their constituents. District pressure primes members. Washington meetings close the loops. In-district advocacy day does not have to look like an office visit. It can also mean site visits, roundtables, and community meetings that you organize with other organizations and allies. So they all can look different. But please use recess to connect with your members of Congress. Next slide, please. What we see most often is that people confuse activity with influence. Using just one messenger or having one great meeting isn't sustainable. Power comes from steady, coordinated pressure over time. When we overload meetings with information, our core ask gets lost. Engagement with member offices yields better result when they are consistent and ongoing. Relying too heavily on emails, phone calls, or sign-on letters become predictable and easy for the offices to not to take so seriously. If a member doesn't see the district or this or state as a state connection in the ask your meeting, it won't probably make a move. Finally, if the member doesn't see local relevance, no amount of national pressure will compensate. Influence comes from sustained, coordinated pressure from local level. Next one, please. So, how do we know if your tactics and strategies are working? Well, power shows up in subtle ways before it shows up in votes or in support. When offices start calling you, that's a signal. When they reach out to you for your insight on a certain issue, that's a signal. And when the decision makers echo your point of view, that's a success. That's how you can measure uh, how those years and months and weeks of relationship building are paying off. Next one, please. I'm going to start wrapping up by saying not every moment is winnable, but every moment is usable. Defensive moments include budget cuts. It could be program rollbacks or hostile administrations. In those periods, our strategy is to protect and exist and minimize the harm as much as possible. Growth moments are when we build infrastructure, expand coalitions, strengthen our skills, and evolve our strategy based on lessons learned. These two moments often overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. Even in defensive periods, we should be building. And during growth periods, we should be preparing for future threats. If we only respond, we stay reactive. If we only build, we risk being unprepared in urgent moments. Sustainable power requires both. Next slide, please. Real federal change doesn't only happen in Washington, D.C. It also resides locally in districts, communities, and the relationships built there. That local power grows over time, and lasting influence matters more than short-term wins. When we strengthen local power, we create the force that drives and sustains federal change. When we build local power, we move federal decisions. Thank you. I will now pass it to Katie Jo.
Hello. Thank you, everyone. My name is Katie Jo Armbrust, and I work for the Grand Forks Housing Authority. Are you guys able to see my screen?
No, not yet.
Better now?
That's good.
All right. So yes, my name is Katie Jo Armbrust. I have had the opportunity as well as the honor of getting to do a lot of advocacy work for my organization. I work for the Grand Forks Housing Authority in Grand Forks, North Dakota. While we might be a small population state, I've had a lot of opportunities to do advocacy work at the local level with our city council, county commission, state legislative body, as well as our governor, and most recently at the federal level over the last couple of years. So I started back in 2010 at the Housing Authority and had the opportunity to create the first community land trust in North Dakota. That gave me the first little taste of advocacy work in working with city staff, as well as state staff and elected officials in understanding some of the nuances in being able to operate a community land trust. And since then, in 2015, I was asked to be a part of the development team for LaGrave on First. And this is really where my advocacy grew. LaGrave on First was our region in North Dakota, in the northeast corner, our region's first Housing First permanent supportive housing project. It's in a single site apartment complex. The first floor is dedicated to tenant amenities and has office space for on-site service providers. And the second, third, and fourth floor have 42 units. They are all one bedroom, one bathroom. They do come fully furnished, and we have, project-based vouchers in all of them. So they're insured that way, affordable for people. In doing that, I was able to really start to expand the support services in our community. So it is unique that I work for a housing authority because we've really played a big role in expanding the support services in our community. And we have only done that when there's an identified gap in services, as well as had the support from our community partners. In no way, shape, or form are we trying to step on other people's toes. But we have very much so expanded support services, and I'll get to that a little bit more in a minute. I'm currently the Director of Program Development and Advocacy. To be honest, it's a title and job description I made up myself. My boss is incredibly supportive of my work and has seen the difference that I've been able to make, along with my coworkers and the community. We have had incredible success with building LaGrave on First. Uh, we have 3 continuum of care grants now. We also have an emergency shelter grant, and we ended up opening a low barrier emergency shelter. All things that aren't necessarily the norms of housing authorities, but it's because of the work that I'm doing to help educate our elected officials and understanding like the realities of the work that we do. At times it can feel like, the nonprofits or, the people who are doing this incredibly difficult work are hyper-focused, and rightfully so, on supporting and meeting the needs of the people in their community. I've taken a different approach of saying, like, I love and enjoy going to our emergency shelter and going to LaGrave on First in order to kind of ground me in, like, why do I do what I do? But we've had a lot of things change over the years. And it's, again, because we're able to, my role in particular is able to dedicate more time to connecting with our city council, our mayor, our state legislators, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yes, a year ago, so North Dakota has a state legislative session that's every other year. And we had, I was the lobbyist for our statewide homeless coalition last year. So as I talked about with LaGrave on First and kind of dipping my toes in the water, the city was working with us. We had a large group of over 30 different entities, whether it was our police department, our healthcare system, members of Congress, staff, our city council members, nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of us got together and said, like, hey, what are the biggest concerns in the community? And identified a population of people who had been experiencing long-term or chronic homelessness. Status quo wasn't doing the trick. So that's how we started LaGrave on First. And we had to get cities, not only were they the ones who helped us identify the location for LaGrave on First, and it is downtown. And we did a survey at our local homeless shelter back then regarding what would they want in a place to live in regards to location and amenities, things of that nature. So we were able to identify a location that was close to like the main bus stop downtown. We actually also have kind of a mini hub of services, whether it's now our state's human or behavioral health clinic. Otherwise, we do have our local federally qualified health center and the other shelter in town that's providing meals twice a day. So the city was instrumental in helping us not only identify a location, but then they also donated the land that we developed on. We did have a hiccup in the steps you take with federal funding, and that project was fairly complex. We had low-income housing tax credits, housing trust fund, home dollars, as well as Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, affordable housing program. And so we ended up needing some help from our senators to get HUD to approve a waiver in a much more timely fashion than they typically do. And then in regards to state advocacy with LaGrave on First, so when we set out to build LaGrave on First, we were the rightful party to raise our hands and say, like, hey, we'll participate in the development. We'll take the lead on that. We did not necessarily anticipate becoming the 24/7 support services on site. That was something that once we kind of realized nobody else was going to be stepping up and had the capacity at the moment or whatever the situation was. So we learned that we needed a whole bunch of money because there wasn't funding currently available to support the 24/7 services there. There's a similar project in a community in the southeast region in North Dakota. So I went to our state legislative session, worked with a state senator from Grand Forks. I met him for coffee and said, like, hi, I don't know what I'm doing, but it's my understanding we have a similar project in Fargo and we're trying to do the same thing. Like, can you help me navigate how to obtain state funding for this specific purpose? So we were able to do that, and it has, originally the amount was small, and we had to get additional grant funding to support our 24/7 staff. But in 2021, so that was back in 2019 is when we first got funding. And so then after that, in 2021, because of the partnership that I have built with our state Department of Health and Human Services now, we worked together and pooled funding and then had it redistributed to the different entities that are providing permanent supportive housing across the state. And so we essentially doubled the amount of money that we were able to utilize for not only our 24/7 housing support staff that are on site 24/7, helping with de-escalation and crisis intervention, but we also now have an occupational therapist on site there. So as well as nutrition coordination or a nutrition program. So there's been incredible improvement in the ability to provide services thanks to those partnerships where, they're on the other side, the state, Department of Health and Human Services, our behavioral health director was, my partner in crime, but on the other side saying like, hey, let's do this. And it, as a state legislator, they want to hear partnerships and, collaboration rather than the constant bickering of, oh, the state says this and the providers say that. But that also takes a very good person on the state level or on the state side for that to happen. In addition, when we were doing LaGrave on First in the development there, my boss and I had previously attended a Housing First Partners conference and learned from Corporation for Supportive Housing that Medicaid, and in particular because North Dakota is an expansion state, that Medicaid, you can have your state do a 1959 state plan amendment, and that is a way to provide some of the support services for permanent supportive housing. So we were incredibly fortunate. We had a lot of legislators who thought that was also common sense, so much as like a natural, like, yes, we don't want to institutionalize people. And when you're able to demonstrate the cost savings of providing services in home and community-based settings, kind of a no-brainer, I guess. So while the state did go ahead, we got original state legislative approval, and then the state wrote the plan and the feds approved it, all that jazz. So it is in operation. That is something that we have not tapped into due to the way it was set up. So that's an ongoing advocacy effort of a couple of North Dakota's state Medicaid directors are no longer with us. So that is to be continued from my end. In addition, we also have had a 5-year SAMHSA grant, and that allowed, that one was for treatment for individuals experiencing homelessness. So we had that from 2018 to 2023 that provided some of the support services previously at LaGrave on First, as well as out in the community. That was a wonderful grant. We weren't successful in the second time applying for it. But now over the last couple of years, we've expanded services with continuum of care grants. So we do have one that originated under YHDP, and then we have a couple more that are doing more of the support services only, but under permanent supportive housing. I was very fortunate to be our lobbyist during the last legislative session, and that took a holistic approach. North Dakota, if you can imagine, it leans a little more on the red side. And so I am a very strong believer in not dismissing people because of the letter behind their name. I also strongly believe that people on both sides of the aisle want the story and the numbers. They might typically care one way or the other more, but I do not believe in only feeding people certain aspects or information without doing so on both sides. That's maybe something that I've been doing naturally. I didn't really realize that, when you make assumptions, and this is on my next slide, but in regards to like making assumptions, it doesn't help because there's a common phrase about assuming. And so it does that. And so I am a big believer in not only communicating to both sides the same type of thing, but also not making assumptions either way. With doing all of that, because we had an interim study with somebody who was chairing that interim committee that others may have considered like a no-go, like, oh, he's the chair, like we're never going to get anywhere. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. We ended up, because of the efforts of him leading that committee, we ended up bringing a bill to the legislative session that included over $200 million in housing incentive fund, which is state general dollars to support the development of affordable housing, as well as 10 million in North Dakota homeless grants. Those are state dollars that support our providers, whether it's emergency shelter or rapid rehousing or homeless prevention, things of that nature. So we had incredible success because we took a chance and worked with him, and he, I'm the same person to you as I am to my friends, as I am to my boss or elected officials or the people that we're working with. Like, I'm just the same person. And so the first time I had met with our chair, I was like, oh, like, tell me more. Like, what do you know about homelessness or like affordable housing? And, he started to talk and talk. And I was like, okay, so like, nope, like you really don't know what you're talking about here, but we're going to be friends and I'm going to help connect you with all the right people so that you have the information you need to make educated and informed decisions. So yes, at the end of last year's legislative session, it was an emotional roller coaster the whole way, but we ended with 10 million in North Dakota homeless grant. And the year prior, or the session prior, we had 2.5 million. So we were able to quadruple that. And then with North Dakota, or with the Housing Incentive Fund, that had previously been allocated at 13.75 million, and we were able to increase it to 25 million. So more work to do there, but it was definitely like big steps in the right direction. And then an act of Congress. My boss has been very supportive of me continuing to learn and attending conferences in DC in order to have the opportunity to meet with our elected officials or congressional members. So it was actually at the National Alliance to End Homelessness Conference almost 3 years ago now, was my first trip doing Capitol Hill visits. I was incredibly nervous. And I had to kind of think back through a mantra of like, elected officials are people just like you and I are. And you don't know what you don't know. So it's been quite the journey over the last few years, but it started with me asking about an issue we had with our an outstanding loan. It had been deferred, but was still sitting on the books. It was from like the 1990s, blah, blah, blah. So the long story short is over the last couple of years, we were able to determine it did take an act of Congress to get this loan forgiven, that HUD or the Secretary they did not have the authorization. And so in the fiscal year 26 Senate appropriations bill, my senator is on that subcommittee for THUD, which is Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. And they were able to get the language, they crafted it with HUD, and were able to get that language included in the Senate's version of the bill. And so, of course, when we went to government shutdown and all that shenanigans, we were panicky of, yes, also clearly tangents of COC funding and all that jazz too. But in that moment, we were very concerned as well about the subsector funding for our loan forgiveness. So happy to report they were able to get it in the consolidated version. They were able to work overtime and have the House get it included or agree to having it included. And so now we're in the process of having Senator Hoeven hopefully come visit us at the end of the month or next month and do kind of like a little event and celebration of the work that he did on behalf of our community and our organization. So, in addition to that, I was clearly in almost constant conversation with some of the staff out there, and clearly the COC funding and them putting out a fiscal year 25 NOFO was incredibly, it's been frustrating, exhausting. Everybody already knows that. And so they were actually able, because we've, not just myself, but some of my partners and other agencies that receive COC grants were able to like easily reflect the chaos that fiscal year 24 or 25 NOFO was causing. So grateful to say that Hoeven was also a part of supporting, ensuring that funds that are, directed back to North Dakota continue to be directed to North Dakota. I should also say that Senator Hoeven, because he's on the THUD subcommittee, invited Secretary Turner to North Dakota. So he came this past August and did a couple of tours of some newer developments of affordable housing and held a roundtable that I was able to participate in, along with a lot of, our partners in crime with the work that we do, whether it was various developers, other housing authorities, service providers, the Homeless Coalition. None of this work, so this is like a recap, because none of this work is done alone. You need friends. So not only make friends with the people who are doing the work that you do as well, because we all do better when we work together towards a common goal. You can find partners within your community. Another example is in North Dakota, we have protection and advocacy. And so folks like them, or, we've had other industries that have stepped up to the plate and provided support or testimony in support of our funding requests, because it is bigger than just the homeless providers or the homeless sector. So utilizing and making friends is very important. I think this is similar with your elected officials, whether it's your mayor or your member of Congress. Like, they're people just like you and I are. And while sometimes they may have different priorities, being like authentic, kind goes a long way. If you imagine putting yourself in their shoes, like, I don't envy them. They have difficult jobs and they are balancing a lot of things. And that's not an excuse for some of the things that are happening, but it's a reality. And so being kind goes a long way. Not making assumptions. I don't think I could emphasize that enough. If you make an assumption that they don't care, they won't care, it's often said, oh, you should look up the history of your member of Congress. That's lovely. I don't think that's terrible by any stretch. I also think it's incredibly important to do what we already do with the people we're supporting. Meet them where they're at. They may have done some shenanigans in the past that you were strongly opposed to. That's okay. Two things can be true. You can really not love A, B, or C, and you can find common ground. And especially in regards to housing, there is so much more common ground than there is not. I think this is something I continue to hear in regards to like using your existing resources. So our local chamber of commerce, like they are already doing a lot of advocacy work at both the state and federal level. Like become a member of your local chamber, get involved. Another piece with your economic development center in North Dakota, the statewide economic development center had previously supported affordable childcare. And so there were a lot of state programs that were created and supported and funded because of their influence. So tapping into those other, tangential, whatever, those side entities that, they're not a complete overlap like housing and healthcare is maybe, but they do have some overlap and they already have existing infrastructure and relationships with your elected officials. So I'm a big fan of tapping into those. And then, I think when talking to red states or your officials who might be Republican, being kind and, I strongly believe in leading with curiosity. Strongly believe. So if you are frustrated or confused or think that they don't care about something or their vote had a detrimental impact, rather than saying like, you don't care, or, well, that was a crappy thing to do, you can simply start with like, hey, it's my understanding that you voted this way. Help me understand why, because it actually has these like unintended consequences on our end. Helping them understand things in a not defensive manner. Because, if we attack each other all the time, we're not going to get anywhere. Think of how you feel if somebody's like, oh, well, she didn't do her job. Like, bah! It instantly puts it in a bad starting place. So being kind goes a long way. And then, continue to follow up, like communicate clearly. Don't send super long emails. Be concise, provide factual information, because that way you build credibility. It's very common now that I hear from our members of Congress staff and have check-ins. Even this morning, I got a text saying like, hey, I think we're going to be in North Dakota. Like, I think we're going to be doing a big event with you guys. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Love you. Talk to you later. So it sounds silly, but making friends makes this work a lot more fun too, because then when you do have the wins, you can share that together. And when things don't go well, you can, have those growth periods where you're having hard, honest, difficult conversations about the realities, but then also able to find a path forward. That was both of you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Katie Jo. We are going to transition to some Q&A with the last 10 minutes here. If you have not put any questions in the chat, now is your chance to do it. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. So Katie Jo and Tamina, we're going to kick it off with a great question we got around what tips do you have for getting to know new members of Congress quickly? There's been a lot of turnover this Congress. I think there's a lot of folks, who are retiring. So there's going to be a lot of turnover, especially with this next congressional session. So what are some quick tips for how you can quickly build rapport with a new congressional office and that member?
I would say do like outreach now to the people who are up for election or are, yes, like that are on the ballot. Because if you get to know them now before they're actually um, elected, then that's like an extra instant in. You're already a go-to source because you came to them before they were in power. So that would be a tip. And yes, there's always turnover. Something I've learned that I love is the staffing. So, for an example, North Dakota's current governor, Kelly Armstrong, used to be our representative in Congress. And so he was there for 6 years and lovely guy. His staff are now our new representative, Julie Fedorchuk's staff. And so that continuity in staffing, I don't know if that's all the time, but it is lovely because you already have an established relationship with some of the staff.
And I would add to that is you can create an onboarding package for new members coming in with info on just generally issues on homelessness and the areas you support and ask for a time to meet with them or their staff. So you're educating them and early on, and then you're also signaling that you want to build relationship with their office and the member and you want to support them.
Thank you both. Next question is about power mapping. Tamina, I know you had mentioned that in your presentation. Can you give a quick overview again of what power mapping is? What does that look like at the federal level? And then Katie Jo, could you maybe give an example of what power mapping looks like in North Dakota with all your partners?
Yeah, so first step to power mapping is understanding influencers for your member of Congress. So if you're trying to work with your senator, who have influence over that person from state and local level? Do they have a good relationship with the governor? Is it state legislature? Is it mayor? Is it the business community? Is it the small business community? Whatever that may be. So the first step is to identify who those entities are that the member of Congress would listen to. And then when you identify your gaps that, okay, these are the folks that have leverage over a member of Congress and can help us to set up a time or communicate our message. Do I have relationship with these entities? Do I need to build relationship with entities? How am I framing my ask with these entities? And then really over time, as I mentioned, build relationship. There's really no other way to do this. And Katie Jo have also like talked about this over and over again. There's just really no other way to do this than build relationship over time. And I know and in this current moment when things feel very urgent and you wish you had relationship and you want something and you feel like, oh, this is a long-term game. What do I do now? Honestly, like if you start building relationship now, you're building that infrastructure that will serve you in the medium and long term. Even if not like this time, but it will come around. So relationship building with the folks that you are power mapping, and then making sure that you're consistent in your engagement with them, even when you don't need them, and there's no.
I'd add to that that when you do make that initial outreach, if you are saying like, "Oh shoot, I wish I would have talked to them sooner," or whatever the case may be, you can tell them like, "Hey, like I'm new to this. I want to be supportive. Like I want to be a resource. I also want you to be aware of what's happening." Like I said, they don't know what they don't know. And some of the congressional staff in particular are stretched pretty thin, or the topics that they're covering are housing and homelessness and then unmanned air systems. Like, okay, cool. A lot of overlap there. So they don't know what they don't know. So bringing them information about what's happening back in your state or your district or whatever the case may be can be incredibly helpful for them in their work.
Perfect. Now we got a question from someone who's trying to scale up their advocacy and they're a little bit nervous with public speaking. So what tips do you both have in terms of, conducting the actual meeting with the staff or the member themselves? How do you kind of conduct yourselves and how do you, kind of get over those nerves and get the job done?
I I do still get nervous. I don't even really care for presenting sometimes, most of the time. It it feels like, oh, what do I know? Other people know things too. Maybe somebody else should be doing this or whatever the case may be. The reality is, in that moment and in that setting, you're the expert. You're the one who does the work. You know what it's like every day to do the grind. And quite frankly, they work for you. So they're supposed to be listening. And they do care. They care so much. And that's why I say no assumptions, because they care way more than you think. And by building that relationship and that trust and credibility, you don't cry wolf, all the things, they're more than happy to help. So you're the expert and have fun.
We got time for another question or two. We have one question in here about, why homelessness is growing. When members of Congress or their staff ask you, like, what's both of yours answers? What is the why behind why homelessness is still so visible? Why are the numbers often increasing still across a lot of communities despite investments?
I mean, I think I'm funny often. So I like to tease them and say, like, I wonder if we haven't been fully funding affordable housing with housing authorities and, their waiting lists are cut off. Like, what a thought. If we're not addressing the need over years, the demand simply continues to increase. And then when you compound that with, quite frankly, a gajillion other reasons, the cost of like everybody knows, cost of housing's gone up, right? So bringing like the practical, hey, in Grand Forks, a one bedroom costs 900 some dollars a month. Hey, in 2010, it cost $500 a month. Now, let's look at the difference between average or area median income. Oh, like there's a little discrepancy there. Like, what a thought. Like, I wonder, why does this happen? And then you can also talk about the number of housing units that have come on board or remained available versus an increase in your population or a reduction in the number of people per household. Like there are a lot of varying factors that put pressure on the housing system and the homeless sector in particular, of course. Um, and then also having your friends from healthcare as well as the education sector, like back you up in that and providing information regarding increasing costs in healthcare and other things as well.
Yeah, I think Katie, Joe covered most of it. One thing I will add is that when uh, when we see policies, evidence-based policies are applied, numbers actually go down. So this is not a problem that's existing in an abstract environment. We actually know the policies and the solutions that work. We have to be consistent and we have to be aggressive in applying them.
All right, we got 1 minute left. So my final question for you both is, in one or two sentences, what is one takeaway you want our audience to have as we leave today's session?
My favorite things are leading with curiosity and nothing about us without us. So feedback, conversations, etc., from the folks that you are supporting or them doing it themselves, lifting each other up is the way to go.
What I would say is do not underestimate the power of local advocacy to move federal advocacy, to move federal policies. You have the power at local and state level, way more than you think you do. Please apply them. Please use them.
On that optimistic note, we will leave you all today. Thank you so much for attending our first of many advocacy workshops. Thank you very much to Katie, Joe, and Timiana for joining us. As you exit today's webinar, you will be prompted to take a really quick short survey. We would love your feedback there so we can make sure that these sessions are reflective of what you need. So thanks again for taking an hour of your time to be with us today. We'll see some of you in sunny San Diego next week for our West Coast conference. Otherwise, we'll see you next month for next month's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.